Hello, viewers. Welcome back to Candid Conversations with Ganesh Kuppala. Thank you so much for overwhelming response to my previous episodes. Continuing that, I want to speak to leaders in the social impact area. So I was doing my research and I found a gem in this area. So I have Michelle Carney with us today, who is founder and CEO of Purpose Driven Impact Organization, and also she was. What excited me, Michelle, was she also led uh, Special Olympics GB for a good amount of time. That's amazing. So we are going to talk about various stuff, with related to the social impact, neurodiversity, inclusion, and various other areas. And I would be interested to learn more about the kind of work that you have done, Michelle. So why don't we get started with your quick introduction to see I've gone through it, but I want my audience to know about the kind of work that you have done for this work, society. Yeah.
I've got, thank you for inviting me. It's brilliant to be on the show, and I've thoroughly enjoyed Girish's. Having worked with Girish before, which is brilliant. So, I've quite, you'll have seen an eclectic and non-linear career path. Sport and disability has been core through it all, but I've done a variety of different things. Sports development has always been my passion, and creating opportunities for people who wouldn't normally have opportunities, and that's been right from the off. And I started out in the Learning Disability Service, and I worked in America with people with brain injuries and challenging behaviours, and then I did a stint randomly in Australia for a few years, and I managed a chain of Irish pubs. So got all my business skills there. Missed sport a lot, so came back in, and I've led a lot of multi-sector, multi-stakeholder partnerships, very much around grassroots sport. Then I wanted to get into international development. Really tough to get in if you're not in. It's always really quite frustrating. So I kind of toyed around with a few different things within international development, and I think 2018 got my absolute dream job. And it was kind of full circle moment as CEO of Special Olympics Great Britain, which was at the time, and still is to a certain extent, the best kept secret in Great Britain. And and then 3 years ago, when we were in 25, I set up my own,
Time flies, isn't it?
own consultancy business, so I can just work with more people and have a bit more independence. And I'm a coach, a mentor. I forgot to mention I've spent some time in Africa, in Southern Africa, leading a charity and building a social enterprise. So
pretty much work across the world.
Which is brilliant, because it gives you an opportunity to see things from different perspectives. True. And you see what services and support is out there, what's not, what needs to change, and how to work with people. And my favourite thing is just lighting a spark and letting people fly. Brilliant. So that's my brilliant.
So what you had amazing journey, Michelle. I have gone through your profile as well. What is that? One thing I always wanted to ask whosoever comes onto my show, that how did you get into this? That's more interesting, exciting, because you could have chosen any career path, right? But making a career in social impact is not a very popular thing, at least 2 decades back, right? Now it is, yes, millennials understand this, Gen Z understand this stuff, and there is so much talk about inclusion, neurodiversity, or various other stuff. But back in those days when you started the career, what made you to get into this instead of going into a traditional way of careers?
Well, I think as a lot is to do with social mobility, and that's an area that I'm really passionate about. I grew up in an area of Manchester of Irish parents. My parents were from farming families. Dad left school at 12, mum left school at 14. Wow. They came to England at 16 years of age. Just starting to work and raise a family. Wow. So I was never around people from a corporate sector. I didn't know. I didn't really know anything about university. And I went to school in primary school in Hume and Moss Side, which was what was called. It was quite a rough area of Manchester, but I absolutely loved it. So where opportunities weren't that great, but actually, for me, the bit that's always been is really good family values and the importance of community. So my family and all of that. So, and then I did an 11 plus, and then I got into a school outside of that area. So I went to quite an academic school, but sport was always my passion. And I was rubbish at exams, and I would later learn that I have a brain that works differently. So it's not suited to the education system. And that's another passion of mine, is that and I talk to a lot of schools about young people to go, don't compare yourself to somebody else.
So true.
We're all really good at different things, and for me, the education system is set up for only one type of learner.
True.
And like we can, as young people, and I, was like the two going, I'm not as clever as this person and this person, so I must be a failure. But actually, at business, I was really good. At sport, I was really good.
So true.
Anything practical, I was really good. So I went to college. Everybody else in my school went to do A levels. I was like, I can't remember anything. So exams are not my forte. So I did business and finance, and it was a tutor at the time. There is a point to it because it's kind of serendipitous and kind of how. So she said, you love sport and you're really good at business. Why don't you put the two together?
Yeah.
And like at university, and I was like, whoa, me.
It's a game changer.
And then I realised there was a career there. I did a lot of voluntary work in Leeds, where I did my undergrad. And I think everything I've done has been, it's not been thought through necessarily, but it's had an underlying, I've taken opportunities where they've landed.
But they were connected to your interest because you had this background where you have human connect more, it's more emotional, and your journey is pretty, you learned a lot through your journey. You had your personal experiences, which is amazing, right? I was speaking to one of the members of parliament before, he had dyslexia during the schooling, and he didn't know that, that's, see, what is more interesting in this kind of children is, unfortunately, they wouldn't know about this. And even more unfortunate, sometimes the education system, UK is a bit better placed, but if you look at other parts of the world, you wouldn't even know the child has an issue.
Yes.
How do you, I think that now that we touched that topic, so have you seen any stories while you're working with, throughout this special ability sports and all that stuff? Have you seen stories like this where children were struggling through the childhood and how they turned this into a success story? Could you please share a story with me?
There's so many different stories through that, and it all comes down to opportunity and support networks around. So if I talk with whilst at Special Olympics, I think Downing Street were working on or they were consulting on the government disability strategy within sport, and they came to me and wanted to consult and talk about disability, and I said, well, rather than speak to me, why don't you come and talk to our athletes directly? They'll tell you of their journeys throughout life, and and I always believed that it was my job was not to lead the organisation, but was to create environments and platforms where the athletes can share their own stories, because storytelling is really, really powerful. And the four of the team from Downing Street, it was during lockdown, joined our online athlete leadership team, which I created. And they still say my contact in Downing Street is like it was the most compelling, life-affirming, life-changing 2 hours they had.
Wow.
The small things like you don't understand, and one of the girls talked about the changes in BTECs now. I did a BTEC, that it was going from all, what do you call it, assessment-based work to now exams.
Yeah.
But for her, she can't do that. So
Cope
she's
up to it,
already
yeah.
being discriminated against. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's so many different areas where, and I think the thing with Special Olympics is when I talk to Special Olympians about life before Special Olympics, to say what was life like before, I didn't have any friends. Like, I didn't want to live in some cases, which is
traumatic,
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I just thought I wasn't good enough. I felt really lonely, and then you said, what's life like now? I have friends. I'm part of a community. I can travel around the world. I get opportunities to speak all over the world, and and I just think if everybody was just given some opportunity to and I was looking at it. When I was at school, I remember getting frustrated in I think it was biology or whatever. You get a hypothesis and everybody come up with the same way of putting an experiment together, and I would do something completely different. There was always the one that got it wrong than me, and I was like, why can't I think the same way as the other girls in the class? And the teacher at the time, all credit to her, said, Michelle, your brain just works differently. And she said, in later life, you will realise it's a positive.
I'm so glad she
honestly, and I didn't even think because as a teenager, you just I just want to be like everybody else.
I know.
And I realised, and it's only in latter years when I've gone, she was absolutely right, and we just need more of Mrs. Connolly, more teachers like that to go. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like the brain is this incredible thing. Like one of my eldest nephew, Joshua, when he was going through primary school, he was labelled as having a learning disability, as this, and he couldn't learn, and all of that. And then I was with him, and I was in his bedroom, and it was in the time of Pokemon, and he was 5. I remember at the time, 5 or 6, and he had this poster of all the different Pokemon, and he could name. He knew every single one. And I went down to my brother and sister-in-law, and I said, he has the capacity to learn.
He's smart, yeah.
He's really smart.
Yeah.
He's just not being taught in the right way. So he was labelled and he was written off as this, that, and the other, and he had dyslexia and da-da-da-da. But once they worked out how he learned, like he went on to secondary school, he flew through maths.
Brilliant.
And the teachers would say, I don't know how he gets to the answer, but it's right.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be able to explain how he gets to it. So, again...
It's a very interesting topic you touched, Michelle. So, because I do hear a lot of stories about autism, dyslexia, and all this stuff, like neurodiversity issues, right? I mean, you talk about... Let's cover this in 2 topics, right?
Yeah.
One is before they get into the working world, but 2, after they get to the working world.
Yeah.
So let's go to the topic of like before they get to the working world in the schools, universities and all. What should the governments or the education system do to make it more clear for the children? Because they don't deserve to be not included, isn't it?
No.
So what do you think the changes should bring in the system?
Well,
and I also want to see, like, sorry to break your flow, but I also want to understand, because you have done work across the world.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you in terms of what your experiences has been in the different parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think worldwide, like it's awareness.
Okay.
We don't know what we don't know. So when you're training teachers, support workers, healthcare workers, awareness and education, having it as part of curriculums is really, really important.
Yeah.
And the ability to ask questions and just kind of spark a thought, and then you go, oh God, I didn't realise. And for me, I'm really simplistic, and I see the world really, really simply. And I think we all of us overcomplicate everything. I think from an education standpoint, I think teaching young people that academia, in its sense, is only one part of intelligence.
True.
And I think there is a shift now and a recognition of emotional intelligence. But this, I think, more focus on vocational skills and what it's like to be good at using your hands, being creative, and all of that. And I think that the one thing that Special Olympics has taught me is, well, I hate the saying, but it's you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I never saw anybody like me, but I had to create the pathway and kind of find my way through. And I don't want people to have to work as hard as I did. So I think there's a education and awareness, but it's also about having more visibility. Now we are certainly in the UK moving towards more visibility, but we just need, one of my biggest passion is, busting myths and, smashing down barriers and saying, this is, anything is possible.
True.
So I think that the whole system, and it's not really that difficult. I think the whole world of EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion, all these buzzwords, they drive me insane. But I think people go into paralysis because it's so big, and it's like, am I going to offend this person? And if we do this for this group, then we're not doing this for this group, and then you get into this overwhelmed. So most people take the easy option and do nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And my view is just do one thing, take one step, and doing one step, being better today creates a better tomorrow. And and there is disparity across the world. I know South Asia, I working in Africa, and where I was based in Lesotho in southern Africa, just seeing the disparity from where our office was based. We had a football, so we used football as a tool to combat HIV/AIDS, education, built social enterprise. But where our offices were, there were the police houses. They didn't have electricity. They had an outside toilet. The kids didn't have iPads and phones and stuff. What they had, and what I used to love, just watching out of my window and I'd go out, is they didn't, when we were children, the ability to just play. And I'd see them just playing and creating, and then they'd have little dance competitions, and I was like, oh, the joy of play. The beauty of not having that technology available to them. But then, again, the downside is, and and Special Olympics around the world, and Special Olympics in India has reached 1.5 million athletes across India. Special Olympics Pakistan is playing a really key role. But even in those kind of continents, the disparity between urban areas and rural areas is massively...
It is massive. It is massive.
It's different.
Let me tell you, right? coming from India, and I lived all my life, childhood in India. You would be surprised to see that, half of the rural population don't even understand there's something like this exists.
Yes.
We don't even know. When I say we, the back in those days, I wouldn't even know that there is like a disabled or specially abled children can still play sport. We were not even aware of it. We would think that, okay, because you have, unfortunately, God forbidden, you got some disability, so you cannot do much, is what the direction that was given to the world.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, even today, at least 30 to 40% of the population in the rural wouldn't even know about it.
Yeah.
So as you rightly mentioned, Michelle, I think the biggest thing that the whole social entrepreneurship should take on is the awareness campaigns.
Yeah.
Do more of it. Go down to the ground level. Talk to the children.
Yeah.
Let them know that they can do it. Because, it's very, very unfortunate. I sit here in London in a beautiful studio talking to you, saying this. I've seen children committing suicides at age of 14, age of 18, 16, just because they get to a situation where they know that they cannot do much about it.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's ridiculous for the entire society, the ecosystem that we have. It's somewhere we say that we can go to Mars, we can do this, we can do that, we have AI, machine learning, so many buzzwords, and unfortunately, I'm also part of the corporates, right? I mean, but you go down to see the other side of the world, even in UK, forget about India, like some parts of Europe
Yeah.
have struggles, and some parts of Africa
Yeah.
where they have like a lot of minerals, natural resources,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. There's so much they could do, but the actual world gets nothing, to
Yeah.
be really honest with you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you would have noticed it. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's
It's unfortunate.
yeah. I mean, when I was in Africa, when I was in Lesotho, we had a young girl who was suicidal at 9 years of age. You know, life was so hard, and I think, you know, when you mix that in with cultural sensitivities and shame of being different, and, you know, if you look at the example of Abu Dhabi, the UAE, you know, they bid to host, and they hosted a phenomenal Special Olympics World Games
They
in
did.
2019.
Yeah.
You know, and they really used it to, well, there were probably a number of reasons they had it, and it wasn't all altruistic. You know, this is about showing the world we can stage massive events. You know, Special Olympics is World Games are one of the, if not the biggest sporting event in terms of numbers of athletes. I don't know, 7,000 athletes.
Massive.
You know, plus all the coaches and support teams and stuff. 5 years ago, 5 years prior to that, disabled people, especially those with a learning disability, Down syndrome, were hidden away because it was it was shame for having a disabled son or daughter, a disabled child. So the shame on a community, on a family, and then they.
Is it a cultural stigma, Michelle?
Yeah, I think and I think there are a lot of communities around the world where there are, you know, a stigma around having, because I must have done something wrong if I've had a disabled child who's not as strong. And, you know, there were some stories, I can't remember which country it was, where a young boy was actually chained up by his parents because he had a learner's, and they didn't know how to control him.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just kind of, and he then went on Special Olympics. His parents started to understand what his needs were, and, you know, and he's gone on to compete. But Abu Dhabi, like the year before the World Games, they led a social, like a campaign. So and they termed people with disabilities as people of determination. So they really kind of went all out, and then it became a sense of pride.
That's good.
So when I was there, like, I mean, they invested so much money and created this incredible event. And, you know, where we'd see, you know, when the local Emirati come out, they were pushing forward the young people with Down syndrome and stuff, as in, have a look. So it did create a cultural shift and awareness. And I think there's a lot of challenges around, you know, those with neurodiverse conditions. And for me, like, learning and intellectual disability is even more complex because mostly it's invisible.
True.
So unless you've got Down syndrome, which is visible, we found that because you can't look at somebody and go, oh, you have a learning disability, you know, you work differently, you have autism, and you know, and then autism, you know, is on a whole big spectrum.
True.
You know, we're all on the spectrum somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just a lot of misunderstanding, and one of the things I think is really important, it's back to an earlier point of yours, is we need to normalise this.
True.
We need to have conversations. And for me, one of the most heartbreaking things when I was at Special Olympics, and I would talk to parents, and without fail, every parent that was there who had a child with Down syndrome was handed their child with an apology. I'm so sorry your son, I'm so sorry your daughter has. Like, it's a really bad thing.
Yeah.
And I just, and you know, and as they learn more over the years, that guilt plays on the parents.
Yeah.
And I want to get to a stage where there's no need to apologise.
True.
You know, and the way that London 2012 worked for the Paralympians. So if your child is now born without a limb, or you've seen people running unbelievable speeds in the Paralympics without a limb, and I want a child to be born like, this is your daughter. You know, the world is, anything is possible.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see the kind of technology, innovations that are coming in that area as well, to make the lives easy for, the specially abled as well, which is amazing, and a lot of great work done by some of the technology firms who invented stuff like, the accessories or stuff they can use to kind of make sure that they feel empowered, which is amazing. But I think what needs to happen, and I think it's the responsibility of all of us together. At the same time, the corporate world, or like the big B's of the world, should come together and say that, okay, this is what we need to make sure that, it's not a symbol of sorry, as you rightly mentioned. It's more to, what I generally notice, right, Michelle, is that inclusion is talked about a lot, but when it comes to implementation, I don't see that at all. And what's your take on that? I mean, do you think corporates are doing enough for inclusion, or is it more like a showbiz than actually not bringing it as a DNA, as a part of the culture? Because I've seen recently one of the big corporates. Okay, I don't want to take the names, but they took off the priority list. I mean, every corporate have a top 10 priority list, and inclusion was a top priority list for them, and they took it off in 2025, which is shame. So how do you look at it, and what should corporates do? What's your take on this?
Yeah, again,
I know it's a tricky question, but
it frustrates the hell out of me, because what we're talking about is inclusion in action. So not just saying, yes, we're inclusive. Well, how are you inclusive, and who are you inclusive of? And accessibility is not just about building a ramp. That's a physical accessibility to help somebody who's in a wheelchair, but accessibility and true inclusion in action comes in so many different forms. And ultimately, what it is about is about treating everybody as an individual, and creating workplaces and environments where going, what do you need, Ganesh, to be the very best version of you?
True.
What environment do you need to work in? And flipping it on its head, so that being inclusive is not the same as being charitable.
True.
Being inclusive, and this is some of my work with the corporates now, is good for the bottom line.
It is.
Being inclusive is profitable.
True, so true.
Having a diverse workforce of brilliant minds, of people with different, ADHD, autism, on the spectrum, wherever you are, having that different thought process is good for us all, and it's good for the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think we've always misassociated doing good with, this is taking up so much time and resource and energy, just to show that we're, complying with the legislation. And I don't think we talk enough about, actually, this is where you've got a competitive advantage. And I'm working with a global creative agency at the moment, and we're developing something quite exciting. And I went, this will give you the competitive advantage, and other people will then follow.
So you do the consulting in that area, right? That's what your current role is. Being with your current firm, as in like you're a founder. So that's where you pitch in to the corporates or any form of organizations. Could be NGOs or government organizations, anybody, or authorities probably. So you go and talk to them about how they can strategize inclusion, bring people together. Because one of my mentors used to say this, I love that when I heard from him, right? Ganesh, the place is inclusive when you really don't talk about it. That's the way to look at it. Because, once you have that part of your DNA, you don't really have to talk about it. What I loved about for some of the organizations where I work currently or previously as well, I had a woman with autism, but she was brilliant in organization skills. Extraordinary. You can't even as you rightly mentioned, so bring to the table what it means to the business
Yeah.
and be proud about it.
Yeah.
Sell it in this way that how it impacts your bottom line. I love the way you brought that up,
Yeah.
and I want to hear more on that. Have you seen any stories like where you brought in different abilities together and how it changed the whole spectrum?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the work that the organisation, the agency that I'm doing some work with, they actually, they're quite young in that space, but they delivered the World Games for Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi. Where they delivered the opening and closing ceremonies, which were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But what was a profound thing for them, they worked alongside young people and adults with learning and intellectual disabilities within the UAE to co-create this. And this is what, in Special Olympics it's called unified leadership. But in terms of going on a journey alongside people and just making it as easy and fun as possible. And I'm going to be launching different an aspect of my business, which is actually why I set it up in the first place. Less than 6% of people with a learning disability in the UK are in paid employment. Outrageous. 94% of people with a learning disability
don't have
not in employment.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm like, this is not okay. So as part of my consultancy, I've created.
So is that a statistics for the whole world, Michelle, or is it more for the UK?
I think it's really quite. I've looked for stats for the whole world, and it's actually really quite hard because there's.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but that's big. 94%.
I mean,
really,
it's
really
outrageous, and that was something that I was outraged when I was at Special Olympics, and I'm very interested in social entrepreneurship, and I continue to mentor social entrepreneurs with a learning disability. And what I'm creating in my team is a team of people with special powers.
Yeah.
So an associate consultancy team of people with learning intellectual disabilities who are leaders in their own right. They have their businesses. So they and I love, so I talk about Michael. And Michael he's run the London Marathon 3 times. Wow. Michael has a business called Pit Welsh Cakes. It's super successful. Does the most amazing Welsh cakes. He also makes gin, and he's been featured on international television. He's been on his Pampers have been on cookery shows. He's an author. He's competed all around the world. He happens to have Down syndrome. Wow. And he happens to communicate in a slightly different way. But he's an award winner in the food business. Wow. And then because I talk about it, people go, oh, that's amazing. And I go, really? This is Michael. And they'll go, you're just kind of smashing down what we think. And we're all guilty of it, and we don't think it's possible. But for Michael, and he's incredible, and he's on my team, he can bring a different insight. So Marcus has competed all around the world. He's a skier. He is an athlete. He's an author. He has his own business which creates artwork. Cool Art 2021. You can buy T-shirts with his designs. He loves nature. So a really talented artist. He's a musician. It's all of that. And he has autism and some complex learning disabilities. He's also really funny. He's a comedian. And he's a brilliant businessman.
Wow, what stories.
And what I want to be able to do is work alongside Michael, Marcus, and Kate is the other one coming through. Now, she was the first model with Down syndrome to walk on London Fashion Week.
Wow.
Yeah, she is incredible. She's spoken at the UN, all of that. But then in everyday life, like I've met, she lives in Northern Ireland, and I met Kate and her mum. They were over a couple of years ago, and it was Kate's birthday, and so we'd ordered a bottle of fizzy, something nice. And when the girl came over to pour, she wasn't going to pour Kate some, and then she gave her a little bit, like she was a child. I was like, it's a 22nd birthday. I think you can fill that glass up. So it's just normalising
I know.
the conversation. But
I'll bring one example to you, right, Michelle. So when we talk about a lot of women leadership, inclusion, and all that stuff, as a, you know, at least in the last decade or so, people started talking about it. But when Indra Nooyi became CEO of PepsiCo, she was Indian origin and became such a big CEO,
Yeah.
right? I mean, PepsiCo is such a big company. It became like a topic of discussion. Whole India discussed about Indra Nooyi, though she was not Indian at that moment, right? But the significant changes comes in when things happen at that scale, right?
Yeah.
So if what I would love to see is a specially abled leader in the C-suites.
Yes.
If I mean the big names that you talk about, why do you know anybody who's at the C-suites? At least I don't know. I haven't seen. Isn't that shame? Because we do have such amazing stories that you're sharing,
Yeah.
but none of the mainstream
Yeah.
biggies
Yeah.
have leadership levels with specially abled. That's a big question I'm posing. I know it's controversial, but I still want to do it because it is important
Yeah.
to bring the message to the world. Because again, I'll bring that example of Indra Nooyi, and there's one more huge bank in India called ICICI Bank. You would have seen it in UK as well. So Chanda Kochar became CEO of ICICI. It became a big game changer in the women leadership in India. So the countries like this, where we have 1.4, 1.5 billion people, will look out for big examples sometimes. It's the same in any other country as well. Like, you bring up the success stories of big names. It inspires the whole spectrum of people.
Yeah.
And same thing you said about Special Olympics with Abu Dhabi. The thing that can change, one major event can change, you cannot do that in 20 years of your normal work.
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of changes we should see. And do you have any hope of? I mean, do you know anybody in the C-suite leadership with special abilities? Am I ignorant or?
No, I mean, I think Richard Branson, is he. I think it's really powerful. He talks about dyslexia. And I think that's really important because you go, he didn't know the difference between gross profit and net profit, but he was able to
big
build.
Leader.
But so I think it's a real shame. But also, if you look at C-suite positions, how many of them are filled with people who, like me, went to a school that was not set up for, so you just kind of look at that social mobility and, is it for the virtue of where you happen to be born and where you happen to went to school that you are given those opportunities? Because if you don't know, you don't know. And I think that there's a lot with that, and I think it's shifting. The bit I get really animated, I'd like to say upset, but animated about is, and I challenge people at a number of round tables with this. In order to, people talk about diversity in a board and whatever, but that only works if there are equal opportunities for everybody to have a voice and to be heard.
True.
Because, and I've seen it in all the CEO roles I've been in and the board rooms. Some people's voices are valuable and listened to.
Stronger.
And some are not. And and for me, I talk about, if we're going to have true inclusive approaches to work and a true diversity of thought, then somebody has to give up their seat. So, and is it the white older privileged man with the blazer who gets a lot out of having the seat and a sense of importance and stuff? Are they going to give up their seat so somebody else can take it? So somebody has to make way for newer voices, and I think that's a shift because it's a sense of losing perceived power and this altruistic behaviour. So we all have to kind of take a look at ourselves and going, are we doing the best? Are we speaking up? Are we calling out what's wrong? or are we sitting silently because we don't want to upset the status quo, and if the chair says this, then this is what we have to do. And are we all truly listening and opening, or are we all naturally bothered only about ourselves? And I think in order to be truly inclusive, we all have to have harsh conversations.
Yeah, I understand.
With ourselves.
And I want to make it clear to the audience as well. One note: this doesn't mean that we are looking for a world where just because of special ability you get an opportunity. No, it's a merit basis. It has to be driven by merit. But the larger question is, don't we have merit in the special abled? And the answer is, yes, we do. But is it not happening enough? And the answer is, yes, it's not. So that's my way of looking at it. I don't know what's your way, because you've seen leadership a lot in this area. One more common topic that I'm hearing a lot these days, Michelle, is autism, right? Yeah. And it's increasing a lot. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's more to do with anything in the ecosystem, or what is it? Like, I don't understand. I'm not an expert. But I do hear stories from the colleagues. Yeah. I do hear stories from, it's again, sorry stories, not really empowering stories.
Yeah.
That gets me nervous sometimes. We are not doing much, but we are always talking about being sorry about certain things. Mm-hmm. What does it mean actually? What's your take on autism as like the trends, what's happening in the recent times? Why is it growing? What do you think is happening?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not sure if it's growing or if it's just being recognised more.
Makes sense.
And we don't know what we don't know, and then when we're now in a culture and environment where we're going, oh, what's wrong with me? I'll go and I can Google it, and I can go on ChatGPT, and it's going to tell me exactly what's wrong. So I think we have more of awareness of it, and therefore most of us want a label for something. If we're not feeling well, we naturally want to know what that is, or if we're operating in a different way. So I think I don't know the medical element behind it, but I think it's down to increased awareness and increased being diagnosed with it.
And people are open to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is amazing. Great news. Because at least it's been, you rightly mentioned about it. So have you ever dealt with kids with autism a lot in the special sport area?
Yes.
And how is it different from other disabilities? Or like, okay, I don't know, maybe I have to choose right words. I'm thinking about it. Like, how do you recognize, or how do you because I've worked with people who had autism. It was extremely difficult for me to find a difference, right? Because they're really, really good in some areas. To be really honest with you, brutally honest, I wouldn't even know if they didn't tell me, right?
Yeah.
So, but when they told me, I was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I was accepting it, and I was appreciating it, and I was like, I had a colleague who don't like lengthy emails, right? Because her attention span, because of her neurodiversity condition, she couldn't read email if it goes more than 2 to 3 paragraphs. Yeah. She loses the connect.
Yeah.
But when she does look at those 2 paragraphs, she's exceptional in responding to it. I've changed my style of working with her.
Perfect.
I've come back and said, okay, let me do this. If I have to tell you 3 points, rather than doing it in 1 email, I'll do it in 3 emails. I'll still send you emails less than 150 words.
Yeah.
I made a point of doing this. How many leaders are doing it? How should it be dealt with? That's my question to you.
Well, I think your example is a beautiful example of that, and it's when I've mentored and coached upcoming managers and leaders, and they're like, Michelle, what book should I read? And I'm like, you can read 1 million books on leadership style. The most important thing is to manage and lead people as individuals.
Yeah.
And that's with or without a disability, with or without a neurodivergent, and just kind of going, what do you need to be the very best version of you? Cisco are doing a lot of work, and I've done some speaking events with them on neurodiversity, and you know, in its simplest form, where it comes, you know, 20%, I think it's around 20% of the global population has some form of neurodiversity.
Okay.
And in its simplest terms, because I'm a simple beast, you know, all neurodiversity is if you look at all our brains are beautifully different. No two brains are exactly the same. But 80% of the population will process information and you know, things this way. 20% will process it that way. And that's just a whole different mechanism. And I think when we start to understand, you know, when we work best in environments, and you know, autism is on such a big spectrum,
subject, yeah.
and like you can be like high performing autism, so that's your example, you know, it's just a way of operating.
True.
And I've worked with people at completely opposite spectrum who are non-verbal, you know, that lack communication, who, you know, when I worked in America, who do the ticking and and you know, and self-injurious behaviours and biting themselves, and so there's a whole spectrum. But for me, it's about seeing the person and just being really cognizant of that, and that's again goes back to responsibility for us all to just be aware. You know, I give you an example. When I was in Lesotho, this is not a disability. We created built a social enterprise. I built a restaurant, conference centre, hotel, and I had two female members of staff who were the on reception in our, and they were miserable. You know, they just didn't like people dealing with people. And I had a girl, Lorata, in the other building, the education building, who was really, you know, and I said to the two ladies, do you like being out front? And they went, no. And I said, do you want to, like, work back in the office? And they like to Bella went, yes, please. And, like, it was, we're putting them in the place, which was their worst nightmare. And then Lorato brought her to that building, and it just changed. It was just, like, simple changes. Just a bit of movement. And the same is with anybody with a disability. So, you know, for some aspects of autism, you know, that the sensory overload for noise and lights, and, you know, just being aware of all of that. And again, it's just how are you prepared for that? And one of the things I talk about really simply in terms of business, and again, this is practical, you know, looking at your recruitment processes, the paper-based system, and I understand why we have to have it and all of that, you're excluding automatically a large percentage of the population. And then you might go, well, I want somebody who can read and write. But is it, you know, just that, or do you need the mind and, you know, to be able to create? When we were, an example, practical example, so when I was at Special Olympics, all the newsletters, I would record them. So not paper-based. Our newsletters were always spoken word and a video, because it's, you know, having that conversation. When we were recruiting for the athlete seat position on the board, it was, I went to the athlete leadership team and I said, this is the opportunity, this is what it looks like, this is the time commitment, these are the expectations. Don't need to do it, but if you do want to do it, send a 1-minute video on the phones as your application. We did the whole process like that. And then the girl who took on Brilliant Kira, what do you need to be successful? She could only read font in a certain colour and a certain typeface. Easy. We prepared board papers. You know, the emails were, you know, we would spend an hour with her prior to meeting. These are the things that are going to be discussed. These are the things that you're going to need to, just really simple, practical things. But it's just that we don't think. And, you know, one of the other things, so big corporates. So you think about like a big building, and I'm terrible with directions, so I never know where I'm going anyway. But if you have a learning intellectual disability, and you're is like trying to process this information, and the fear of unfamiliar, and you walk into this big build, like, how do you know where to go?
True.
And how do you know that you're gonna have to check in here, and that is really overwhelming.
Yeah.
One, again, simple practice: create a video, and which says, just shows the building. When you get here, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to go over to this desk. You're going to give them your name. They're going to give you a badge. You're going to go through this entry thing. Then there's going to be a lift or the stairs.
Yeah.
By doing that, it seems a really small thing.
Yeah, you would have noted that I've done it with you.
Okay,
I know.
brilliant.
Yeah, I've done it with you today as well, right? While you're coming to the studio.
Yeah.
I know you're coming to the studio for the first time, maybe. Then I wanted to make sure, that's what I do with my guests, like, irrespective of what kind of, ability they have. I don't care.
Yeah.
But what I want to make sure is my directions are really clear.
Yes.
And while you're talking about it, I'm really, really happy that you brought the topic. But if you go to some of the international airports, they don't have the proper signboards.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised. I'm talking about big airports in the world.
Yeah.
You can go and see, some of them are in United States, some of them are in UK, and some of them are in like rest of the part of the world, because they were built like probably decades ago.
Yeah.
And they're not adapting
Yes.
to the new ways of living. And with all these findings, I think that there needs to be small tweaks that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And it's an appeal to the whole world. Whosoever is watching this, please do make those small changes. It's going to make huge impact.
Yeah.
And I was telling you that example, right, Michelle, where I was telling that, okay, I'm absolutely fine. I'll not send you 3 topics in one email. Rather, I would do 3 emails.
Yeah.
It didn't even cost me 20 seconds. But the results that I got was stunning. You can't imagine.
Yeah.
I've got the best reports from her, my employee. And she was extraordinary. She got promoted in the next 6 months. I had not even a single day of thought process where I was thinking, okay, is she good enough? What happens if she works with somebody else who would write lengthy emails? Would she be good enough and all? I didn't even have that in my back of my mind, because I thought, if I can do it, you should be able to do it.
Yeah.
If you're not able to do it, then it's not her who should change. It's you who should change.
Exactly.
I think that's the direction we need to go to, right?
Yeah, and again, that's us each individually taking personal responsibility for, and I see leadership really simply as an inverted hierarchy, if you like, and I talked to, led a lot of
downward
charities
pyramid.
So I can't, the board sits at the bottom. The board's role is to create the space and the opportunities for the CEO to be the best version of themselves. The CEO role is to support and make sure your team has got everything they need, and then and so it goes on. And why wouldn't you want to? I love working with brilliant people. I love being challenged, and that whole check and challenge and doing things differently. Through COVID. At Special Olympics, so I used to have a check-in every day with the team. We would do a mental health check-in and how's everybody doing. Once a week, the athlete leadership team joined us. We were going through a massive challenge, because with the Special Olympians and people with intellectual learning disabilities, the ability to process information was really quite hard. And I got COVID quite early on, and we talked about, whether it would incite fear with because what they'd seen on television is if you got COVID, you're going to die. And then I was like, I'm happy to use me as to say, I'm okay. I didn't need to go to hospital. Thank God, and I'm fine. But we had a big national games which was supposed to be going ahead in Liverpool, like massive investment, and we had to kind of work out how we were going to make that decision. And the athlete leaders, we had such a really good developed relationship at that stage. They helped us think about things we hadn't even considered. And how brilliant is that? When I first met the athlete leadership team, they weren't called that. They were called a council. And I'd said, what do you want? you know, and they said, we want a voice, we want to be heard. Done. Like, they're part of the whole leadership team for the organisation, and actually just seeing value. And I think underpinning everything that we've spoken about is the power of storytelling.
True. Advocating it.
And humanising it. And
normalising it, basically.
Normalising it. And, you know, and I want to be able to, through my business and my associates, bring them to the table at planning stages for, you know, major sporting events and have them around the table. Have you considered this? Have you considered that? You know,
But do you see, Michelle, at some point, instead of you have Paralympics and the mainstream Olympics, do you see a golden day where you will have Olympics inclusive, not really separate ones? I don't know how it works. Or is there a possibility, or do you have the special ability Olympic leadership sitting in the mainstream Olympics chains and running the mainstream Olympics, learning from there and running this as well? Does it happen?
Well, I think, because Special Olympics sits as part of the Olympic family, but it's different.
Yeah.
So you've got Olympics, Paralympics, and Special Olympics.
Yeah.
And Olympics and Paralympics are kind of tied together because they're elite sport and the best of the best at what they do. But again, two very different organisations.
So you don't see them coming together?
Well, you know, I think politically it's a challenge, and the International Paralympic Committee, IPC, struggle for, you know, in terms of that resource investment. And I would love to see a time when they come together. The Commonwealth Games are doing this really well, and I did some work with Comic Relief and Sport Relief and Birmingham 2022. And I led the partnership there to try and deliver social impact on the back of major games. But I learnt a lot more about the Commonwealth Games in that they're actually more inclusive than Olympics or Paralympics.
Yeah.
And that's part and parcel. So I think it can be done. I think that what drives...
Because we can wish for it.
I think we can wish for it, but I think without all of these, and again, governance, political movements, sponsorship, all of that. And, you know, I hope to get to a position where Special Olympics, and, you know, when I first came in, I talked to the CEO of Paralympics GB at the time. It was like, I'd love to work closer together. And I think there's just some,
Okay. And one more thing I wanted to ask Michelle is, like, is there a way, like COP, I mean the COP Summit for sustainability, peace mission summits for the peace, world peace, geopolitical situations, UNO working on various stuff and all, like in the global platform, right? Yeah. Similarly, do you see any conference or global scale advocacy or a discussion forum for special abilities? Does that happen at the moment, or is there a possibility? Can you drive it, or?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty with Special Olympics International, do a phenomenal job around the world, and it Special Olympics.
When I say that, sorry, Michelle, I don't mean the sporting events.
Yeah.
I mean advocacy events, like, you know, the conferences where we go and talk about, you know, COP talks about sustainability, you know, reducing plastic.
So it's
a global conference, which is dedicated to discuss about how you save the environment for the future. Similarly, for the Peace Conference of the World, talks about the geopolitical situations and all. Do you have any forum like that for special abilities, where everyone across the globe comes together and advocates, say that, you know, this is what it means, let's take it to the world, let's have goals in the next 10 years and all this?
It's a great question. And the fact that I don't know the answer means that there's probably not.
Exists,
because I think there's a lot of networks trying and doing some work. And, you know, when I talk about special, so there is an organisation that works doing some really good stuff. Layla, who leads it, Dial, it's called. And they have, they would do these quarterly or 6-monthly global webinars and conferences on inclusion and, you know, equitable working within corporates. And, you know, I brought one of the athletes, Katie, who's brilliant, was a panelist. We were co-panelists from a Special Olympics perspective, but she was sat alongside Walmart and Yahoo and the former CEO of Manchester United. She was an equal panelist, and like for me, that was just like bringing a Katie version, and I think we need to be doing more of it. And I think it's like I go to this big leadership conference in sport every year, and they're trying to get more female representation, but the diversity stuff is held before the event, and I'm like, just do it as part of it. And it's like, is this good enough? Do we need to stop?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is he trying to get in?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. What was it?
Yeah.
What was I talking about there?
The global conference piece.
Yeah. I bet if you look at women's sport and the women's sport industry, and again, I'll just be a little bit critical in some. You've got the same old people talking about the same old shizzle on on another day, and is it actually taking action? And I just think we just need to do something a little bit different, and I think that's through the power of storytelling, but with the benefits. And this is where we started. Being inclusive is not charitable.
Yeah, I know.
Being inclusive makes business sense.
Yeah.
So, and we need to be able to share the stories to demonstrate that. So that the biggest businesses get ahead of it and go, actually, we're going to be on, and then everybody else will be following. But I think there should most definitely be the conferences and just
it is food for thought. You can at least think about it, and I think that's the possibility. Yeah, a brilliant conversation, Michelle. We talked about a lot of stuff. We did talk about a lot of stuff. I think I would love to continue this conversation later at some point. But thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to call it as closing commentary from your end? And is there any call-out actions from, is there anything you want to call it like top 3 priorities or something that you want to tell audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the most powerful thing is to make small changes. So listening and learning is crucial. But like, what can we do today that makes tomorrow better? What is the one thing, we can do? And whether that's like, how have you ever had a conversation with somebody with an intellectual or learning disability? If not, why not? Because it's the most joyous conversation that you'll have, and you'll be really, it'll change you. And as an examples of some of the big global sporting ambassadors, when they've gone to speak to Special Olympians, they had gone into it thinking they were giving something to Special Olympics, and then they've realised that the athletes gave them something far more valuable. So I think, just educate yourself, just read more stories, and then just kind of go, what is the one thing I can do differently today that will create a better world for tomorrow? And what are my special superpowers that and how do I work best? But just and be kind. Just being kind and empathetic, 2 most important skills in my view, and kindness, and just being a good person it just benefits us all. So why wouldn't we want
Brilliant. Thank you so much. On that great note, we're going to end this conversation. Thank you so much, audience, for being with us throughout the conversation. I think if you ask me the key takeaways from this, one definitely is, making sure you have that awareness about people around you. People, may look different, but they may have some other stories inside. So be kind to everyone. You don't lose anything being just kind to other person next to you. That's number 1, top priority. Number 2, I do want to call out very clearly to the big B's of the world and corporates of the world, or whosoever is the working environments across the world. Please do make inclusion as your priority, and don't just talk about it. Make it as part of your DNA and make it part of your culture, right? That's very, very important. And the third key note I want to mention to the children, especially, who are suffering with some of these needs, don't worry, you're brilliant. We are all with you. We will build the future world. And I'm super glad, Michelle, with a lot of the stuff that is happening in the Gen Z world, right? They're brilliant, they're conscious, they know the stuff, and they talk about all this, the special abilities and all. I'm really, really super positive. The last 5 years at least, across the globe, things are changing, and a lot of good things are happening. So I'm a very positive person in general. So I'm really, really hopeful things will be better, things will be good. And the only one thing I want to see, maybe it's an appeal to the social entrepreneurship working in the special ability area. Please do think about something like, COPs of the world, or, Peace Conference of the world. Do something for the special abilities. Let the advocacy, let the sponsorship, let the discussion go into every root of this world. There are areas across the globe who don't even know about this, and I want to make it very, very clear and punchy. They don't know about you. So it's important for you to kind of go and introduce yourself to the world so that they know you, they come to you, because the loss is from the both ends. But by not knowing and without having opportunity to explore to the world is a lose for both of the worlds, right? I mean, we are losing exceptional talent. They're losing exceptional opportunities. So both ends. Let's close this gap. Let's build the beautiful world for all of us together. Future is brilliant and beautiful. Thank you so much, audience. See you again soon.